All right, let's turn to Ecclesiastes, chapter number 10. We're making it through Ecclesiastes and had some good discussion last time. I appreciate that. If you have something, I encourage you to share. But as we come to chapter 10 here, what we're going to see are kind of like some proverbs here. And our text from Daniel Estes here, Life and Love, says that in chapter number 9, Solomon exhorts his readers to live to the fullest as wise, God-fearing people, but also to be aware that this wisdom that God gives from above is not appreciated by everybody. And so as we go to chapter number 10, we're going to see Solomon illustrating or reinforcing what he taught in chapter 9, that we are to be wise people. We're to live life to the fullest, to the glory of God, but that's not always appreciated in this sin-cursed world. And so we're going to see some good things here. And as I went through this, it's things that all of us can apply to our lives, chock full of good stuff in chapter 10 of Ecclesiastes. So let's just get started right there with verse number 1. Dead flies. Don't you think it's wonderful? Start out a chapter in the Bible with dead flies. I mean, that's just such a picture there, especially anybody who's ever cleaned in the church and gets on these windowsills here. But it says, dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. Let me tell you something. There's some recent things that have happened that show that this truth, this verse, illustrate is absolutely correct. What is it talking about here? It's talking about here perfume. And so you have some perfume here, the ointment of the apothecary, and in this perfume somehow some flies end up, in that perfume. And then they die. And it may not be many dead flies, it may be one or two, but the few flies that end up in the perfume cause the perfume to lose its beautiful odor and instead give it a, dead fly sort of a scent. What is it saying here? Well, it says here, so does a little folly, which is foolishness, him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. Verse number 1, here's what we can learn about this. And it's a warning to all of us. One foolish decision can destroy a life. One foolish decision can destroy a life. I said that's very appropriate now. It seems like we've seen some big-name preachers. And I'm not talking about crazy preachers. I'm talking about preachers that preach the Word of God. And they've fallen. They've fallen from their pedestal. I remember a little while back, Tony Evans, very respected black pastor from down in Texas. He had to step down from the church where he pastored. Ravi Zacharias was a real encouragement to a lot of people in his apologetics. After he's dead, things start coming out about him. And there's a guy you probably don't know, but some of us do. Scott and I would. A guy named Steve Lawson. And he's even spoken at Bob Jones University for a conference there. And just a real solid man of the Word. And he had to step down at his church, Trinity Bible Church in, I think, Dallas, Texas. And you say, well, wow, Steve Lawson, YouTube is full of his videos. He breaks down the Word of God, and they can still be helpful. These Bible, he knew the Bible. He knew how to explain the Bible, how to exposit it. Ravi Zacharias, he was good at apologetics. You could still pick up a book of his and learn something good from it. But their reputation is shot. A whole lifetime of building a reputation and doing a work for God is shot by one foolish decision to commit immorality. David, the same way in the Bible. People think of Bathsheba and Uriah, the Hittites. There's a preacher that, we knew, Scott and I knew, and he would preach, and he was talking about, he was from West Virginia, and he was, drawing a straight line with a crooked stick. And yet, in the last part of his life, he had a doctor tell him, take a little wine for the stomach's sake. Be good for you. And he was out in public drunkenness, got arrested I think on more than one occasion for that. And just, So this is a warning to us. And that is, as you live the life of wisdom, one bad decision can ruin it all. And that doesn't mean you can't find forgiveness from the Lord. David found forgiveness. Psalm 51. I got to preach that at the prison last Friday. And it's a wonderful psalm. And talks about David confessing his sin and then pleading for that hyssop, wash me with hyssop, which is associated with blood. And so he's pleading for the Lord to forgive him. And the Lord does forgive him. But yet he lost a little baby because of his sin. And his children were messed up because of his sin. And so, yes, there's forgiveness. But remember, we're dealing with under the sun. And so one mistake that we make, and the ointment, the perfume, is corrupted. And so something to remember when we're tempted to do wrong. Okay, any thoughts, any questions on that? All right, let's go on. Verse number 2. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. Now, I'm sorry for anybody who may be left-handed in here, but this is a kind of a dig at being left-handed. But what it's saying here is the wise person wants what is right, the right hand. The foolish person wants that which is wrong, which is the left hand. And this is just in that culture back then, as it was in our culture until recently. The left hand was the wrong hand, the right hand was the correct hand. And so that's what it's saying here. A wise person wants what is right, and a foolish person wants what is wrong. And so that's how you can tell a wise person from a fool, but it's also in our own lives. What are we choosing? What is right or what is wrong? Well, that shows us whether you're wise or whether you're foolish. And so that's verse number 2 here in chapter 10. And this is, like I said, it's kind of like the Proverbs here. A little bit, it's like individual nuggets here. Verse number 3. Yea, also, when he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth him, and he saith to everyone that he is a fool. And so it's pretty evident. If you listen to someone, you can tell whether they're wise or whether they're foolish. And what this is saying is the fool demonstrates his foolishness in his actions and words. Watch how he lives. Listen to what he says. And you can tell whether he's living based on the right hand or on the left hand, whether he's wise or whether he's foolish. And it's not that difficult if you really listen to what someone is saying to tell whether they're a fool or whether they're wise. And especially if you watch what they do. Watch what they do. And that's what Solomon is saying here. You can easily identify them. Okay, verse number 4. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. What is it saying here? What it's saying here is, and let's look at some of these words here. I see it's got a letter C here in my Schofield Reference Bible. And it says the word yielding here means calmness. Calmness. Instead of getting boisterous and being just belligerent, calmness is what yielding there is talking about. And so it says, yielding pacifieth great offenses. So what it's saying here is calmly standing up for what is right pleases the Lord, and it's what we ought to do. Calmly standing up for what is right. And so you have a boss, okay? Everybody tends to have a boss at some point, and that boss is doing something wrong. You don't go in there like a fighting rooster, but you go in there and you calmly lay out what is happening that is wrong and what needs to change. This would be true, with an authority in the political realm as well. It doesn't do any good, to get into a brawl with a political opponent. but simply if you have a chance to sit down and talk with someone or stand and talk with someone, just calmly and without fear lay out what is right. Well, how do we know what is right and what is wrong? Well, pick your fights and stand for those things which you know the Bible backs you up on, and that you have, chapter and verse, so to speak, on those issues. There's some things that I can be fearless on as a pastor. I can't be fearless, on something like tax issues. We can disagree on tax issues, and you may be right or I may be right. When it comes to, different ways to deal with immigration. We can have different thoughts on that, and you could be right or I could be right. Some people say, let them all in. Some people say, close down the border. This is something, maybe a gray area. I think personally, the way to keep the most immigrants safe is to shut the border so they don't try to cross and put themselves in danger. I think that if people want to maintain an ability to pay for people's welfare, that you don't overload the system, and that way you can continue to help people. But that's my thoughts. Someone else may say, open her up and try to minister to them all. But there are certain issues, like on abortion. You're just not going to move me, okay? This is a living baby, and we're in the midst of what I call the Holocaust. This is, you don't compromise on that, and you don't try to curry favor by compromising on that. The other side doesn't compromise. I'm not going to compromise either. What is marriage? God defines it. Jesus agrees with it in the Gospels. It's between a man and a woman. I don't care what any court, any law says. That's just the way it is. And so there are issues. There's male and female. Yeah, because of the fall, there's like 0.01. There's a small percentage that may, have some abnormalities or have some problems where you might have to do a DNA test to determine for sure what they are, which gender. But for the most part, there's male and there's female. And that's how God made us in his perfect Eden. And so we don't have to be belligerent and mean. But you know what I've found in life is the most effective way to stand up for something is to calmly tell someone your position on the issue. Okay? It's like being on the Pound Town Council. You disagree with someone, but you don't have to raise your voice. You just calmly say, well, this is how I believe. And sometimes, it says you overcome, evil with good, and you make people more upset, and you get your point across a lot better by being quiet about it and confident about it, rather than being cocky about it and being loud about it. And so that's what this is saying here in verse number 4. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, this person who could literally have your head off, just like that, he's a disagreement with you over something that's very important. It says here, leave not thy place. If it's a biblical thing, be like, what's that, John Knox, in Scotland? Take your stand, even if it's against the wicked king or the wicked queen. Take your stand. Leave not your place. But remember, calmness pacifieth great offenses. If you present your case in a calm and a peaceful manner, then you're less likely to have your head chopped off. And you're more likely to be heard for what you have to say rather than irritate someone by the way you act. Do you understand how I'm saying this? And I think that's true in ministries and preachers. We need to tell the truth, but we don't need to be mean about it. I remember, I think it was Bob Jones Jr. one time said at the college we went to, he said, if you can preach hell without having a tear, at least in your heart, arise, then you shouldn't preach on hell. Because it's not something to glory in, it's not something to be glad of that people are going there, but you tell the truth, but you do it with that broken spirit that says, I want you to repent, not that gives off the impression, I want you to go there. And so that's kind of the theme of verse number 4. Any thoughts on that? And if I've got the Bible behind me, it ought not matter who is in that audience. I'm going to tell the truth, but I'm going to speak the truth in love. And that's the most effective way to do it. That's what Solomon is saying here in verse 4. All right, verses 5 through 7. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, which means on the earth, as an error which proceedeth from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low places. Now the rich here is talking about those who are rich in wisdom and knowledge. It's not talking about those who have a lot of money or wealth. Okay, so it's talking about here. I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. People who have the character and the knowledge and the ability of a slave, they're the ones that are sitting on the horses. They're the ones who are in authority. And princes, people who are like Prince Charming, people who have it all together and have wisdom, they're the ones who are, the slaves. And so what he's saying here, verses 5 through 7, is this. Foolish men often rise to places of prominence. And on the flip side, here you are. You're getting wisdom. You're trying to live godly. And guess what? That's not always going to be appreciated by this world. Foolish men often rise to the top in this world, and the wise people are pushed to the side. And that's what this is talking about here in verses 5 through 7. And this is just, it's Solomon telling the truth. This is how it is. Okay. So don't get discouraged when you see that happen in politics and you see that happen in the real world around you. All right, verses 8 and 9. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Whoso removeth stones shall be hurt therewith, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. Now, Pastor Randy Reagan had Mystery Night. I didn't go to Mystery Night. I don't know what Mystery Night is. I think he's going to have another one. But I guess it's like a riddle or something. You have to figure out the riddle. This is a wonderful verse to give to your kids and say, okay, chew on this for a day. What in the world is Solomon trying to say? And so what he's trying to say here is that every meaningful action you take is going to involve risk. Right? What's he saying here? Verse number 8. He that digs a pit shall fall into it. You're digging a pit, digging a ditch. Every once in a while you're going to lose your balance. You're going to fall into the ditch. It says here, whoso breaketh an hedge. So here you are chopping the hedges, right? And all of a sudden, there's a risk. A snake could be in that hedge, and it could come out and bite you. Whoso removeth stones shall be hurt therewith. You're picking up rocks in a field, and you stumble and you hurt yourself on the rocks. And then this last one, he that cleaveth wood. Here you are, you're cutting wood. Let's say the axe head comes off, hit you on the head or something. There's a risk. Every meaningful action involves an element of risk. And if you know you're gifted at something, and you know God wants you to do something, don't not do it just because there's a risk involved. And that's true. We're talking about the gospel. You know, whenever you share the gospel, there's a risk of rejection, a risk of ridicule. But yet we do it. We do it. I praise God I got to do the commencement at the graduation at the prison, and I'd never preached to a room full of Muslims before. Most of them are probably Muslims. Some of them were shaking their head no. We just told them the truth, and one of them in the Muslim service came up to me and said, I appreciated what you had to say, chaplain. I'm like, whoa, that just blew me away. Take that risk. Take that risk. Because it's always right. And you can, what do they say? You can never give the gospel to the wrong person. Take that risk. Take that risk. Everything meaningful involves risk. Bob Jones Sr. used to say, you can't move without producing friction. There's always going to be some rub when you're going in the right direction. But do it. Don't not do something just because there's risk involved. So, okay, that is life. Verse number 10. If the iron be blunt, he do not whet the edge, then must he put to more strength. but wisdom is profitable to direct. What is that saying here? This is an old saying that, people use, and that is, he is no fool who takes time to sharpen his axe. And that's what this is talking about here. Why did, Kelly go get her associate's degree? Well, hopefully through her education, she learned something to help her be a better teacher. I know when I worked in the daycare in Pikeville, we'd go to those daycare classes, and there are things I still remember from those classes that have helped me. When you're talking to a kid, get on their level. I can't do that as easily anymore. But that was, so they can, it's eye to eye. There's just things like that. And listening to kids and things like that. But sharpen the axe. Wisdom prepares the wise person for more effective living. Just as a sharp axe cuts more trees, when we gain more wisdom, we're more effective in meeting the challenges of life. This is why it's so important, when we're going through, like on Sunday night, the doctrines of the faith. You're learning more so that when that cult pops up in your life, or that person pops up teaching some, or believing some, or promoting some false teaching, it's like, wait a minute, I know the Bible doesn't say that, And so wisdom helps us in life. Just like sharpening an axe helps us to cut down trees. You say, well, I just don't have time to read my Bible. I don't have time to, whatever it may be. You think of a thought, and you're like, well, I need to research this thing out so I can fully understand it. Well, I just don't have time. But especially when it comes to spiritual matters, taking out time to sharpen that spiritual axe and get more wisdom is always worth the time that it takes. And that's just something, my mother was a worker, and she never could understand how someone could just sit down and read a book. And people like that, they want to work, and that's fine. That's just, she was a worker, But, people reading the books, might have come to an understanding on some things that she never understood, you see? But that's just taking time to learn more wisdom is always time well spent. Now, to pick on people that watch cat videos, watching cat videos, that's not time well spent, and that's not wisdom. That's what the brain rot. I learned what that term was. But if you're pursuing something that'll help you in life, then that is something worth pursuing, and that's never wasted time. Never wasted time. Like Mountain Music School. These kids go to Mountain Music School. They were up here Sunday night playing the offertory. Playing Amazing Grace on these stringed instruments. So that's something to remember. It's never foolish to sharpen the axe. All right, verse 11. Surely the serpent will bite without enchantment, and a babbler is no better. Now, what is this talking about? Well, what it's talking about is, you see that guy playing the do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and the snake's kind of dancing like that with its head. Well, that's what it's talking about here, and that is, you don't try to reach in and grab the snake when it's not under its spell, because if you do, you're going to get bitten. That's what it's talking about here. And so what it's saying here is wisdom is only beneficial if it's applied before the problem arises. In other words, you know what to do, and yet you don't do it, and guess what? It comes back to bite you. Maybe that's where they get that from. I don't know. But that is it. Apply wisdom before the problem arises, or else it's not going to do you any good. So he's got the flute. He knows how to do it, but he doesn't charm the snake, and he reaches in there, and the snake bites him, and maybe he's dead. That's what that proverb is talking about here. All right, verses 12 and 13. The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool will swallow up himself. And swallow up himself means to consume him. It'll consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is mischievous madness. Foolish talk always ends in destruction and madness. foolish talk. Always ends in that. Kind of like the little kid, trying to pick on the big kid, Okay, that just doesn't make sense, right? You got to live wisely and not live foolishly in life. It always brings destruction. Verse 14, a fool also is full of words. A man cannot tell what shall be, and what shall be after him. Who can tell him? A fool may talk a lot, but he really does not know the first thing about what will happen. Just watch television, cable news, right? The prognosticators, and then they never play them back when they get it wrong, right? But that's just the way it is. Verse 15, a lot of words, but no sense. Verse 15, the labor of the foolish wearieth every one of them, because he knoweth not how to go to the city. And that is, the fool cannot understand the simplest things in life. And you know people like that. You have no common sense. You have no life sense. And that is the fool. 16 through 18. Woe to thee, O land, when thy king is a child, and thy princes eat in the morning. Blessed art thou, O land, when thy king is a son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season, for strength and not drunkenness. By much slothfulness the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through. What is it saying? Well, it's saying here that foolish leaders harm many through their incompetence, but wise leaders benefit others. And so it's important to have people in charge who are wise instead of foolish. Foolish, other things we see here is lazy. We see here drunkards. These are the type of people that'll do what? That'll cause the building to decay, and that'll cause the house to drop through. And you've seen that, haven't you? You up and down the roads, it's dropping through. Why didn't they take care of that leak? Why didn't they take care of that leak? When it was small, and now the roof's caving in. That is just, anyway, you know what it's saying there. Verse 19, a feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things. What is he saying here? Well, what it's saying here is a wise person is frugal in how he spends his money. Well, how do you get that from that verse? Well, a feast is made for laughter. Hey, let's go out to eat. My treat, I just won the lottery. Or my treat, I just got a bonus at work. Let's all go out to eat, and I'll feed everybody, whoever wants to come. And you go down to Reno's and buy everybody. When you're buying someone else's meal, they're going to say, well, I'll take that porterhouse steak. I'll take that, that extra large ribeye, with whatever, fried in bacon. And so then you run up this big bill, and all of a sudden, guess what happens to the money? It's gone. It's gone, that's right. And then it says, wine maketh merry. Hey, buy everybody around. Everybody on the house. I've got it. I'll cover it. Everybody's happy, right? They're eating or they're drinking. But guess what? Money answers all things. At the end of the day, the person who doesn't get involved with that foolish spending, where they just waste stuff that has no real effect. It doesn't change anything. It just doesn't. There's nothing to see. You eat it all up, you drink it all up, there's nothing there. But a person who is frugal in how he spends is going to have money to pay the bills at the end of the month. And is not going to worry about not being able to have heating oil or coal or whatever it is you heat your house with. Is not going to be worried about being kicked out because you can't pay your electric bill, or getting your water turned off because you don't have enough to pay the water bill. So remember, instead of partying with your money, remember, you're going to need that money to pay your bills. And when you get a fast cash, hey, always have something in the back of your mind. We're working towards such and such. Like with the church, we'd like to pay the parking lot. So we're going to just save up for that, instead of just using it for other things. And always have a goal. What is something good that we'll be able to show something for it at the end of the day? And it's not the partying, it's not the feasting, it's not the drinking. Whatever that is that would honor God is what you need to be aiming toward. In verse number 20, curse not the king, no, not in thy thought. Curse not the rich in thy bedchamber. For a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. A wise person is cautious in his criticism. And that's something you'll learn, especially around here, where a lot of people are kin to each other. You criticize someone and you don't know you're talking to their first cousin, and it just gets around and it just messes you up in the community. And so always be cautious in what you say. Because, in this day, you say something against a king, that's treasonous. You get your head chopped off. A rich person can make it very miserable for you. Even though you think you're saying it to someone you can trust, it can get out there. That little bird, so to speak, has wings and will bring it out to everybody. So be cautious. A wise person is cautious in what he says, and especially in his criticisms. So, Solomon knew from his observations that only godly wisdom can open the door to a significant life. However, sinful people scorn and reject that kind of wisdom. The wise person trusts God enough to live by his standards, enjoying life as God intended. He may not be applauded by others for his faith, but he knows that he must persist in living for God nevertheless. And a life lived for his glory is the best life, and the world may not understand it, but we do what's right, and God will see us, and he will bless us, and his pleasure and his blessing is all that really matters in the end.